Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. As the controversy surrounding loot boxes and video games, and more specifically with Electronic Arts and EA DICE with their abortive attempt at incorporating them in such a predatory fashion within Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA, the outrage being felt by gamers seems to not be abating quite as quickly as Electronic Arts would hope. With the release of the new Star Wars movie coming out in just a few short weeks, I can't imagine that Disney is very happy at all with having such a giant brewing dumpster fire beginning to overshadow the hype train when it comes to the movie's release. And it would seem that, in regards to the current situation with EA and EA DICE, there has been a petition out there on the internet that has been there for a couple of weeks already that promises to ramp that stress on EA up yet another notch, as it calls for the revocation of Electronic Arts' license to produce and develop Star Wars games. The petition itself, which now sits at a little over 35,000 signatures, discusses Electronic Arts' pedigree when it comes to their handling of the Star Wars license, including the bare-bones release of the first Star Wars Battlefront EA in 2015 that was rushed out the door in order to capitalize on the hype of the first movie and was later admitted by EA to be the case. They also discussed the closure of Visceral Games and EA's statements that people didn't want a single-player experience, as well as everything that has happened with Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA and its gambling mechanic pay-to-win business model. A game that I would like to point out was supposed to be EA's apology to fans already upset over the horrendous first game in the new series of Battlefront titles. Now, in the petition's author, John Hunt, had the following to say: "We now know that the entire online aspect of Star Wars Battlefront 2 was literally built around microtransactions to try and squeeze every single dollar out of the consumer as they could. Let's start with the star cards. These cards allow you to add upgrades to your characters, such as extra health or quicker reload. This would cause a problem in any game, as it can make the game unbalanced. However, instead of allowing the user to choose what upgrades they want, the user has to unlock these star cards instead. And how does the user unlock these star cards? You guessed it, loot boxes. So yet again, when someone pays real-world money on loot boxes, they can easily have an unfair advantage over players who are unlocking these loot boxes through in-game rewards, essentially making it pay to win. And this has 100% been noticeable while playing online. The game hasn't even fully released yet, and people have an unfair advantage over others, and it's very noticeable, and makes the game so unbalanced that I've already given up on it. It's not just me who's noticed either. All you have to do is search online to see almost everyone who's played it saying the same thing. The community on this game will die out faster than the original game because of this. People won't buy your stupid loot boxes, EA. Instead, they'll sell the game and buy something else." And the sentiment of getting Star Wars out of the hands of EA seems to be a common thread with a good number of gamers tired of how EA has handled the franchise to date. So let's take a quick look at how they have handled it by looking back through the Star Wars titles that EA has released so far. Their first title with the Star Wars license was Star Wars: The Old Republic, an MMO that was released in December of 2011. This game later transitioned to a free-to-play model 1 year later in November of 2012. Now, it's unclear how many people are still actively playing the now 6-year-old MMO, as those figures are not disclosed by EA or BioWare, but it's been pointed out on numerous occasions that the free-to-play mechanics of the MMO have done very little to help the game as it has progressed and matured. The next title that was released on EA's Star Wars lineup was Star Wars Battlefront EA. The novelty of a Battlefront title with modern graphics quickly soured due to an extreme lack of content, and Star Wars Battlefront EA suffered a drop-off of active players more severe than I can ever remember seeing with any game with a multiplayer component that was even halfway functional. One of the major points of discontent, which I remember I harped on before the game was even released and called them lazy for not doing it, was the lack of a single-player campaign. This severe oversight was at first defended by EA's Peter Moore in an interview with GameSpot in April of 2015, stating, "You make a decision years out and you plan for what the world looks like when the game ships in 2 or 3 years. That's about the intuitiveness about the executive producer and his or her vision for the game. Between when a dev team starts working on a game and when it finishes, the world becomes a different place." He then followed that with saying that their data suggested that very few people actually play the single-player component of these kinds of games, implying that was their reason why it wasn't included. However, in an investor broadcast in May of 2016, Patrick Soderlund stated, "We made the choice due to time and being able to launch the game side by side with the movie that came out to get the strongest possible impact." Basically meaning they rushed the title out the door to capitalize on the movie's hype train. The next Star Wars title in EA's pocket was a mobile game also released in 2015 titled Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes that I admit I have never played. Reviews for the game, however, paint the picture of a very run-of-the-mill mobile game that includes all of your standard microtransaction barriers. The reviews that I've looked up all point to nothing at all outstanding with the game, and it seemed to be a mediocre cash-in on the Star Wars license with no tie-in to the Star Wars universe whatsoever. The verdict on the game issued by TrustedReviews.com states, "Playing out more like a fairly shallow kit-based RPG battler with no real link to the Star Wars franchise, Galaxy of Heroes' intentionally simple battle system is undermined by an over-complex take on a free-to-play that bamboozles the player with flashy lights at every turn." And then EA's next title is Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA, which we've covered the major problems with that game's microtransactions and loot boxes so much it's starting to make people suffer from burnout, which is probably what EA wants, and so we won't launch into a full diatribe here. And then Electronic Arts has 3 as-yet unreleased titles under the Star Wars license. One new mobile game titled Star Wars Rise to Power, the game that was up until recently being developed by the now dead Visceral Games that is being, quote, refactored in order to better meet EA's intended business model. And then lastly, we have an unnamed Star Wars project being worked on by Respawn Entertainment, which was recently purchased by Electronic Arts. So, given what we've seen with Star Wars The Old Republic, EA's investment in the mobile market, and what they've done with both Battlefront EA titles as well as their closure of Visceral Games because a linear storied experience didn't meet EA's intended microtransaction model, it's no small wonder that many people feel that Electronic Arts is incapable of treating the Star Wars IP with anything amounting to respect and want the license given over to at least a less greedy publisher. And it's a shame to see, really. Electronic Arts has purchased and or absorbed a phenomenal amount of creative talent within the games industry. They have the capacity and the talent to be able to churn out some amazing games that people could fall in love with for years, and yet they seem to be hell-bent on maintaining a business model that focuses on short-term gains at the sacrifice of customer loyalty and respect. And after looking back on how EA has treated the Star Wars license, I can't help but agree that they don't really deserve what they have, and perhaps it is indeed time that Disney revoke their license and look towards assigning it to a company more capable of treating both the IP and its fans with the respect they deserve, and there is a potential of that outcome. Now, Disney sunk vast amounts of money in acquiring the Star Wars franchise that, while they most likely made that money back in the first movie alone, they are obviously looking at the long game when it comes to this franchise, whereas EA is looking for immediate returns. Now, we'll see how these two different viewpoints play out in the coming weeks and months ahead. But as always, please do let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as YouTube is still labeling all of my videos as not suitable for most advertisers, I'm forced to remind everyone that I do in fact have a Patreon, and if you like what I do on this channel and would wish that I'm able to continue doing it, then perhaps give it a gander. The link is in the description down below. Even a $1 contribution will grant you access to the Patreon-only areas of my Discord and access to the monthly Patreon AMA livestream. Special thanks to the 20 and Up Club and our $100 elites, whose continued generosity will never cease to amaze and astound. Those people are listed down in the description as well. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.